"I could have done better," said the Duke of Ashcroft, looking Miss Verena Wren over, as though she were a horse he had been offered and found wanting. And Verena, who had not the slightest desire to marry him, and had been dragged to this interview entirely against her will, looked back at him with perfect composure and said, "Good luck," and meant it so sincerely, with such genuine warm well-wishing, that the Duke of Ashcroft was, for the first time in his adult life, completely wrong-footed. It was meant to have been a betrothal. The two families had arranged it between them over Verena's head, in the manner of families with more consequence than kindness. The Duke needed a wife of good blood, the Wrens needed the connection, and Verena, being a poor cousin of good blood and no fortune, was the piece that fit the arrangement, whether she wished to or not. She had been informed, not asked. She had been brought to Ashcroft Court and stood in the great drawing-room like a parcel awaiting inspection, and the Duke of Ashcroft had walked in and looked her over with cold, appraising eyes, and pronounced, to her face, in front of both families, that he could have done better. He had expected, what, tears perhaps, a wounded flush, the stammering distress of a poor girl whose one great chance has been found wanting by the man who holds it. That was what such women did when the great man was displeased. That was the natural order. And the Duke of Ashcroft, who had been the great man his whole life, had never once, in all his cold consequence, received any other response. Verena Wren smiled at him, a bright, easy, entirely genuine smile, and said, "Good luck, Your Grace. Truly, I hope you find her. I do not doubt there is a better-blooded, better dowered, more decorative young woman out there somewhere who will suit you far more than I could, and I wish you every success in the search, because I confess I have no wish whatever to marry you, and you have just handed me the most graceful possible escape from an arrangement I never wanted, and I am too honest to pretend I am anything but relieved. So, good luck, sincerely. Shall I go? I imagine we have nothing further to discuss, and I should hate to keep you from your search for someone better." There was a silence in the great drawing-room, of a very particular quality, for Verena Wren had done the one thing no one had ever done to the Duke of Ashcroft, which was to agree with his insult and thank him for it. He had told her she was not good enough, expecting to wound her, and she had received the news as excellent tidings, because, it emerged, she genuinely did not want him, had never wanted him, had been marched into this betrothal against her will, and considered his rejection of her not an injury, but a liberation. She was not pretending to be unbothered to save her pride. She was actually unbothered. She was, in fact, delighted. And the Duke of Ashcroft, who had spent his whole life being the most wanted man in 3 counties, and who had grown so accustomed to being wanted that he had come to find it tedious, and to treat the women who wanted him with the careless contempt of a man with too much of a thing he did not value, the Duke of Ashcroft found himself, for the first time in his life, standing in front of a woman who did not want him at all, and discovered, to his considerable annoyance, that it was the single most interesting thing that had ever happened to him. "You do not wish to marry me," he repeated, as though the words were in a foreign language. "Not in the least, Your Grace," Verena said cheerfully. "Nothing personal, I assure you, or rather, entirely personal, but not in the way you mean. It is only that I have no wish to be married to a man who inspects me like livestock and announces to a room that he could have done better. Even setting aside your manners, which are remarkable, I have observed that you do not appear to actually like anyone, and I have decided, over the course of my 21 years, that I would rather remain a poor unmarried cousin my whole life, teaching other people's children and keeping my own counsel, than marry the grandest man in England, if he does not like me, and I do not like him. Some women want the coronet badly enough to endure the man beneath it. I find I am not one of them. I would rather be poor and free and mildly amused than rich and married, and quietly dying of a cold husband's contempt. So when you say you could have done better, Your Grace, I could have done better too. We are agreed. It is the first thing we have agreed on, and very likely the last. Good luck to us both." And she curtsied, a perfectly correct, entirely unbothered curtsy, and turned to leave, and the Duke of Ashcroft, watching the one woman in England who did not want him walk cheerfully out of his drawing-room, felt something he had not felt in 15 years of being wanted by everyone, which was the sudden sharp desire to be wanted by someone in particular, and heard himself say, before he had decided to, wait. Verena paused and turned and raised an eyebrow with an air of polite curiosity that suggested she could not imagine what more there could possibly be to discuss. "You are very sure of yourself," the Duke said, "for a poor cousin with no fortune who has just thrown away a dukedom." "I have not thrown away a dukedom, Your Grace," Verena corrected. "You threw it away when you told me you could have done better. I merely declined to weep about it. And yes, I am sure of myself, because being sure of myself is the only fortune I possess, and I have guarded it carefully, precisely because it is all I have. A rich woman may afford to doubt herself. She has other things to fall back on. A poor one cannot. Her own good opinion of herself is her whole estate, and I will not spend mine marrying a man who has just informed a roomful of people that I am not good enough for him. I have too much self-respect, and it is, as I say, the only thing I own outright, and I do not intend to gamble it on a cold man's coronet. Was there anything else? You did say wait, and I have waited, and I confess I cannot imagine why." And the Duke of Ashcroft looked at the penniless, unimpressed, entirely self-possessed young woman who valued her own good opinion of herself above his entire dukedom, and understood that he had, in his careless contempt, just insulted and lost the single most interesting person he had ever met, and that he wanted, with an intensity that alarmed him, to get her back, not because she was better-blooded or better dowered than he had thought, but because she was the one woman alive who did not care what he thought of her at all. And a man who has been wanted by everyone his whole life will crawl over broken glass for the one person who does not want him. "I find," said the Duke of Ashcroft, slowly, "that I may have spoken too hastily." "I find," said Verena Wren, "that you may have. But it makes no difference, Your Grace, because I did not want you before you insulted me either, and your insult only made the not wanting easier to act upon. You cannot uninsult your way into my regard. Good luck." And she left. Genuinely left, cheerfully, without a backward glance, and the Duke of Ashcroft stood in his great cold drawing room and understood that he had just met the person who was going to turn his entire life upside down, and that she had no intention whatever of doing it, which made it, somehow, completely irresistible. Verena's own family, when she returned home having refused a dukedom, greeted her with the particular fury of people who have watched a fortune walk out the door. "You wished him good luck?" her Aunt Wren shrieked, for the third time, as though the words physically pained her. "The Duke of Ashcroft insulted you, and instead of doing anything sensible, anything at all to recover the situation, you agreed with him and wished him good luck and walked out. Verena, do you understand what you have thrown away? A dukedom, the greatest match in 3 counties, security for you and connection for all of us, and you tossed it in the fire because he hurt your feelings. Have you no sense? Have you no gratitude? Do you imagine offers like that come twice to a girl with no dowry?" "He did not hurt my feelings, Aunt," Verena said, with the calm that so infuriated her relatives. "That is what none of you can understand. If he had hurt my feelings, I would have been wounded, and a wounded girl might be talked round, might weep and reconsider, and crawl back. But he did not wound me. He merely showed me, very clearly, exactly what a marriage to him would be, a lifetime of being inspected like livestock by a man who could have done better. And I declined it, cheerfully, because I would rather be a poor cousin my whole life than spend it being made to feel I was not good enough by the man who was supposed to cherish me. You call that throwing away security. I call it keeping the only thing I actually own. Your own good opinion of yourself will not keep you in your old age," her aunt snapped. "It will not feed you when we are gone. It will not. A girl in your position cannot afford pride, Verena. Pride is for rich women. You are poor. Poor women take what is offered and are grateful." "Poor women," Verena agreed, "are told exactly that, by everyone, their whole lives, that they cannot afford self-respect, that pride is a luxury above their station, that they must take what is offered and be grateful however it is offered. And it is the cruelest lie ever told, Aunt. because it is precisely the poor woman who most needs her self-respect, having so little else, and precisely the poor woman who is most pressured to sell it cheap. A rich woman who marries a man who despises her has other comforts. A poor woman who does the same has nothing at all. No fortune to console her, no independence to escape to, only the daily grinding knowledge that she sold the one thing that was hers, her own dignity, for a roof and a title. I will not do it. I would rather teach other people's children until I die than wake every morning beside a man who thinks he could have done better. That is not pride above my station. That is the only wealth my station allows me, and I mean to keep it, whatever it costs, because it is mine, and it is all that is truly mine, and I have guarded it too carefully for 21 years to sell it now to the Duke of Ashcroft, merely because he is grand. Her aunt threw up her hands and swept out, and Verena was left alone, a poor cousin who had just refused a duke, with nothing in the world but her self-respect and the cold comfort of having kept it. And she did not, in the quiet after, regret it for a moment. She had meant every word. She had spent her whole life watching poor women be pressured to sell their dignity cheap, and she had promised herself, young, that whatever else poverty took from her, it would not take that. And she had kept the promise, that day, in the Duke of Ashcroft's drawing room, and she would have gone on keeping it to the end of her life, teaching and poor and free, and counted the price well paid. What she had not expected, what no one, least of all Verena, had expected, was that the Duke of Ashcroft would take her refusal not as an insult to be resented, but as a challenge to be met, and would set about, clumsily and then genuinely, becoming a man worthy of the self-respect she had refused to sell him. She had guarded her dignity by walking away. She had not dreamed that the walking away would be the very thing that won her, in the end, a man who had learned, because she made him learn it, that a woman's dignity is not a thing to be overcome, but a thing to be honored, and who came to love her precisely for the fierce, unpurchasable self-respect that had made her wish him good luck and mean it. Her whole fortune had been her refusal to be cheapened. It turned out to be the only dowry that could have won her the one man worth having, the one who had to become worth having in order to win it. The Duke of Ashcroft had never pursued a woman in his life, and he discovered, over the following weeks, that he had no idea how, and that Verena Wren was going to make him learn from the very beginning, like a schoolboy, and enjoy his floundering the entire time. He began naturally, the way a duke begins anything, by attempting to command it. He wrote to the Wren family and informed them that he had reconsidered, and that the betrothal might proceed after all, and that Miss Verena Wren should be brought back to Ashcroft Court. And the Wren family, delighted and baffled, conveyed this to Verena, and Verena wrote the Duke of Ashcroft a short, polite, and utterly immovable note declining, pointing out that she had not been party to the original arrangement and would not be party to its revival, that her refusal stood entirely independent of his change of heart, and that he could no more command her into wanting him than he could command the tide, and might save himself the trouble of trying. She wished him, once again, good luck. It was the first time in the Duke of Ashcroft's life that a command of his had simply failed, not been resisted or negotiated, but serenely, cheerfully ignored by someone entirely beyond his power to compel. And it should have infuriated him, and instead it delighted him, because he understood that he had finally found something in the world that his rank could not buy, and that the winning of it, if it could be won at all, would have to be earned, honestly, from a woman who did not care a straw for his dukedom. So he did the thing he had never once had to do. He set out to make himself likable. It went badly, at first, because the Duke of Ashcroft had spent so many years being wanted regardless of his manner that he had never developed any manner worth wanting, and his early attempts to charm Verena Wren were so stiff, so transactional, so obviously the maneuvers of a man accustomed to buying what he wanted, that she saw through every one of them and told him so, to his face, with a frankness he found alternately maddening and refreshing. When he sent her expensive gifts, she returned them with a note, observing that he was trying to purchase her regard, and that it was not for sale. When he arranged, through her family, to be thrown constantly into her company, she informed him that she saw exactly what he was doing, and that proximity would not accomplish what charm had failed to. When he paid her elaborate compliments, she laughed at them, actually laughed, and told him they were the compliments of a man who had read about wooing in a book and never practiced it, and that if he wished to interest her, he would have to try being a person rather than performing a duke. "You do not know how to talk to me," she told him, on one of the many occasions their families contrived to throw them together, "because you have never had to talk to anyone. You have only had to permit people to talk to you, and to be flattered, and to bestow your notice as a favor. And now you want something from a person who will not flatter you, and does not want your notice, and you have discovered that you have no idea how to simply be a man in a room, with a woman, wanting to be liked, with no rank to fall back on. It is rather sad, actually, Your Grace, and rather touching, and it is the first genuinely interesting thing about you, this floundering, because it is the first time I have seen anything real in you at all. Stop trying to charm me. You are very bad at it. Try, instead, to actually converse with me about something you truly think, or feel, or care about, if there is such a thing, and we shall see whether there is a person under the Duke worth talking to. I suspect there might be. You keep almost showing him, by accident, in between your dreadful maneuvers. Show me him on purpose, and I might stay in the room. Keep performing the Duke, and I shall go home." And the Duke of Ashcroft, stung and challenged and, for the first time in his life, genuinely uncertain, did the thing she asked, because he had discovered he would do a great many things to make Verena Wren stay in the room. He stopped performing. He began, haltingly, to actually talk to her, about the estate he had inherited too young and did not know how to love, about the loneliness of being wanted for a coronet and known by no one, about the cold father who had taught him that a duke does not need to be liked, because a duke need only be obeyed, and how he had believed it his whole life, and was only now, at 35, beginning to suspect it had been a lie that had cost him everything worth having. And Verena Wren, who had braced for more maneuvers, found herself, against her own firm intentions, becoming interested, because there was, it turned out, a real person under the Duke, a lonely, badly raised, quietly intelligent man who had never once been required to be human and was discovering, painfully and late, that he wanted to be. She did not fall in love with him quickly. That was not her way, and she had meant every word about guarding her own good opinion of herself, and she did not intend to surrender it to a man merely because he had begun, under pressure, to be interesting. But she stopped leaving the room, and she began, cautiously, to enjoy their conversations, the real ones, the ones where he forgot to be a duke, and to look forward to them, and to argue with him, and to tell him plain truths that no one had ever dared tell him, and to watch him receive them and slowly act on them, becoming week by week a warmer and more human and more genuinely likable man under the lash of her honesty. She was remaking him, and she knew it. And the strangest part was that he knew it too, and was grateful for it, because he had spent 35 years being flattered into stone, and had finally met the one person who cared enough to chip him back out. There was one afternoon that Verena marked, privately, as the moment she stopped being able to pretend she was merely tolerating him. They had fallen into the habit, on the occasions their families threw them together, of walking out, the only way to escape the watchful relatives. And on this particular walk, the Duke had been telling her, with the new halting honesty she had bullied out of him, about a decision he faced on the estate, whether to enclose a common that his steward assured him would increase the rents, and that a dozen poor families used to graze their few animals and would be ruined by the loss of. He had come, he admitted, within a day of signing the enclosure, because the steward's arithmetic was sound and it was simply what one did. And then he had stopped, and not signed, and could not entirely say why. "You could not sign it," Verena said, "because you have begun to see the poor families instead of the arithmetic. That is new in you, Your Grace. A month ago you would have signed it without a thought, because the poor were not real to you. They were figures in a ledger, scenery, the sort of people a duke does not actually see. And now you have begun to see them, and having seen them, you cannot ruin them for a few pounds of extra rent, and you do not even entirely understand why, because no one ever taught you that the people beneath you were real. but you are learning it. By yourself. That is worth more than all the pretty compliments you have wasted on me these weeks. That, right there, the not signing. That is the first thing you have told me that has genuinely moved me. And you did not even do it to move me. You did it because you were troubled and wanted to think aloud, and I happened to be there. That is the man worth marrying, Your Grace, the one who cannot sign the enclosure. Not the Duke, the man who lies awake over a dozen poor families. Where has he been hiding all this time? Under 35 years of being told he did not need to exist, the Duke said quietly. My father signed every enclosure. He would have thought the not signing a weakness, and I believed him my whole life. And then a poor cousin wished me good luck and walked out of my drawing room, and somehow, I cannot account for it, the world began to look different. The people in it began to look real, and I find I cannot go back to not seeing them. You did that, I do not know how. You have not lectured me about the poor. You have merely looked at me and told me the truth. And somehow in the looking and the truth-telling, I have started to see the way you see, and I cannot unsee it. And it is the most uncomfortable and the most alive I have ever been. He looked at her. Do not enclose the common. I have already decided that. I decided it before this walk. But tell me I am right to. I find I want, absurdly, to be told by you that I am right. I have never in my life wanted anyone's approval. I want yours so badly it frightens me. And Verena Wren, who had walked out of his drawing room a month before, entirely unbothered, found that she was not unbothered now, that watching the cold Duke become, before her eyes, a man who lay awake over poor families and wanted to be told he was right to spare them, had reached past all her careful armor and touched the thing she guarded most fiercely, which was her own capacity to love, hoarded and protected through years of poverty, because she had so little else to give. You are right too, she said, and her voice was not quite as steady as she would have liked. You are right to spare the common, and right to lie awake over it, and right to want to be told so, because wanting to be good, wanting it enough to lose sleep, wanting it enough to seek out one honest voice and ask, that is the whole beginning of actually being good, and most men never manage even the wanting. You are managing it. You are becoming, Your Grace, a genuinely good man, in real time, in front of me, on a country walk, and it is, she stopped and looked away, because she had nearly said something she was not ready to say. It is a great deal more attractive than a coronet, is what it is, and I will thank you to stop it at once, because I signed on to mock you into humanity, not to find myself moved by you, which was never part of the arrangement, and which I resent extremely, and which appears to be happening anyway, entirely against my will, the same way everything about you happens against my will. Walk on, Your Grace, and do not look so pleased with yourself. Becoming a person is the least a man can do. I merely note that you are doing it. I note it. That is all I am prepared to say today. And she walked on, ahead of him, so that he would not see her face. And the Duke of Ashcroft followed, and did look pleased with himself, and had every reason to, because he had just watched Verena Wren be moved despite herself. And a man who has spent his life being wanted for nothing had just been wanted, for one unguarded moment, for something real, and he would have walked to the ends of the earth to be wanted that way again. You are a great deal more bearable than you were, she told him, some weeks on, with the particular affectionate insult that had become their whole language. When you first told me you could have done better, I thought you the coldest and most contemptible man I had ever met. I now think you merely the worst raised, which is a different thing, and a far more hopeful one, because a cold man cannot be warmed, but a badly raised one can be re-raised, and you are being re-raised, Your Grace, chiefly by me, and against your own dukedom's every instinct, and it is coming along better than I expected. You are almost a person now. It is quite alarming. I did not sign on to make a human being out of a duke, and yet here I am doing it, and I find I do not entirely mind, which alarms me more than anything. You are the only person, the Duke said, who has ever told me the truth. Do you understand what that is? To a man in my position. Everyone lies to me, flatters me, agrees with me, tells me I am right when I am wrong, because I am a duke, and it is dangerous to do otherwise. And you walked into my drawing room a poor cousin with nothing, and told me I had bad manners and worse morals, and did not know how to be a person, and were entirely right about all of it, and did not care a straw whether it displeased me. Do you know what a gift that is, Verena? You are the only honest voice in my whole flattered, lonely life. I do not merely want to marry you because you refused me, though that is how it began. I want to marry you because you are the only person who has ever cared enough about the truth to tell it to me, and a man who has been lied to his whole life would give his entire dukedom for one person who would not lie to him. That is what you are, and I am terrified you will marry someone else, or go off to be a governess, or simply keep cheerfully not wanting me forever, and I will go back to being flattered into stone by people who do not care enough to tell me I am wrong. The opposition, when it came from the very person who had arranged the match in the first place, the Duke's mother, the Dowager Duchess of Ashcroft, a magnificent and glacial woman who had helped assemble the original betrothal as a cold dynastic alliance, and was now horrified to discover that her son had gone and done the one thing she had never accounted for, which was to fall genuinely in love. For the Dowager had chosen Verena Wren precisely because she seemed safe, poor, well-blooded, and, the Dowager had assumed, so grateful for the elevation that she would be biddable, a decorative duchess who would produce heirs and defer to her mother-in-law and cause no trouble. What the Dowager had not anticipated was a poor cousin who refused the match, wished the Duke good luck, and then, having captured his heart entirely against her own intentions, proceeded to tell him the truth about himself daily and remake him into a warmer and more independent man, a man who was, alarmingly, beginning to think for himself, to question his mother's judgment, to become, in short, less controllable. The Dowager had wanted a biddable duchess. She saw, with mounting horror, that her son had chosen the least biddable woman in England, and that this woman had more influence over him in a month than the Dowager had managed in 35 years, and that if the marriage went forward, the Dowager's long reign over her son and her house was finished. So she moved to stop it, and she moved with the cold skill of a woman who had ruled a great family for decades. She could not simply forbid the match. Her son was of age and had gone past listening to her. So she worked on Verena instead, summoned her, privately, and made her an offer of exquisite cruelty, dressed as kindness, a large sum of money, settled on Verena immediately and irrevocably, on the single condition that she refuse the Duke and go, enough to make Verena independent for life, to free her from ever having to be a poor cousin or a governess again. Everything Verena had ever said she valued, freedom and independence, and her own means, handed to her outright. All she had to do was give up the Duke. It was cleverly aimed, for the Dowager had listened and had understood that Verena valued her independence above all things, and calculated that a woman who prized freedom so highly could be bought with the one currency she truly wanted, not jewels, not rank, but the means to be free. And she presented it so, not as a bribe to abandon a man, but as the fulfillment of everything Verena claimed to want, the independence she had always said she prized, offered clean and complete, with only a cold Duke's love to be sacrificed for it. Verena Wren considered the offer seriously. That was the thing that would have surprised the Dowager had she seen it. Verena did not reject it in outrage. She sat with it, honestly, because it was, in fact, everything she had said she wanted, and she was too honest with herself to pretend the temptation was not real. Independence, freedom, never poor again, never dependent, never at anyone's mercy. Her own means, her own life, answerable to no one. The very things she had told the Duke, that first day, were her whole fortune and her deepest values. Here they were, offered outright. All she had to do was give up a man she had never even meant to want. And in the sitting with it, Verena discovered the truth about her own heart, which was the thing the Dowager's offer, for all its cruelty, unintentionally revealed to her, that she did not want the independence without the Duke. That somewhere in the weeks of remaking him, of telling him the truth and watching him become a person, she had come to love him, really love him, the warm, remade human man under the ruined Duke, and that a freedom that required giving him up was not freedom at all, but a different kind of poverty, the poverty of a life without the one person who had come to matter. She had told him she would rather be poor and free than rich and married to a cold man. She discovered, holding the dowager's offer, that she would rather be married to the warm man he had become than free and rich and without him, which meant she had fallen further than she had let herself know, and that the dowager, in trying to buy her off, had accidentally shown Verena the exact measure of her own love. She refused the money, and then she did the braver thing. She went to the Duke and told him the whole of it, the offer, the temptation, the sitting with it, and what the sitting with it had revealed. "Your mother offered me a fortune to leave you," she said. "Independence, freedom, my own means for life. Everything I ever told you I valued. And I considered it, Julian, honestly, because it was everything I have always said I wanted, and I will not pretend I was not tempted, because I was. And in the considering, I found out a thing I did not know, and I have come to tell it to you plainly, because plainness is the only currency we have ever dealt in. I found out that I do not want the freedom without you, that I would rather be married to the man you have become than free and rich and without him. That somewhere in these weeks of telling you the truth and watching you turn human, I went and fell in love with you, which I never meant to do, and which your mother's cruel, clever offer has just forced me to admit, because when she offered me everything I claimed to want in exchange for you, I discovered I would not take it. So there it is. I am not marrying you because you are a duke. I refused the Duke that first day, and meant it. I am marrying you, if you still wish it, because you have become, under my relentless correction, a man I actually love, and I would rather have you poor than any independence without you. Your mother meant to buy me off. She only showed me my own heart. Now, you had better propose to me properly, and quickly, before I lose my nerve, because I have never said any of this to anyone in my life, and I do not intend to say it twice." And the Duke of Ashcroft, who had begun by telling this woman he could have done better, and had spent weeks being remade into a person by her honesty, and now heard her say she had refused a fortune to keep him, went down on his knees before the poor cousin he had once inspected like livestock, and proposed not as a duke conferring an honor, but as a man asking for the thing he wanted most in the world. "I could not have done better," he said. "That is the truth, Verena, and I have known it for weeks, and I am ashamed of every word I said that first day. I could not have done better than you if I searched the whole world for 100 years, because there is not a better woman in it, not better blooded. I do not care a straw for blood, but better, braver, and more honest, and more truly herself, and more entirely unpurchasable, as my mother has just discovered to her cost. You are the best thing that has ever come into my cold, flattered life, and you have made me a person, and I love you past all sense or dignity, and I am asking you, on my knees, as a man, with no dukedom in it, to marry me. Not because I could have done better, because I could not, because there is no better, because you are the best, and I was a fool who could not see it, and you have spent weeks teaching me to see, and now I see nothing else. Marry me, Verena, please." "Yes," said Verena Wren, laughing and weeping at once. "You impossible, badly raised, thoroughly remade man. Yes, get up off the floor, and do stop looking so astonished that I said yes. I have been falling in love with you for weeks. You simply were too busy floundering to notice. Yes, I will marry you. God help your mother." She did, in the end, face the dowager herself, not to gloat, but because Verena Wren did not leave hard things to be done by others, and it seemed to her that the woman who had tried to buy her off deserved to hear, from Verena's own mouth, exactly why the attempt had failed. "You offered me a fortune to leave your son," Verena said, standing before the glacial old woman with the same serene immovability she had shown the Duke that first day. "Independence, freedom, my own means for life. And you calculated well, madam. You had listened. You knew I valued those things above all. But you made one error, and I have come to tell you what it was, because I think you should understand your defeat. Having earned it, you offered me everything I valued in exchange for your son, and in the weighing of it, I discovered that I valued your son more, that somewhere in the weeks of knowing him, he had become worth more to me than freedom, than independence, than my own means. You did not buy me off, You showed me my own heart, and made me certain, and sent me straight to him to say yes. So I thank you, madam, sincerely. Your cruelty was the making of us. I could not have been sure I loved him until you offered me a fortune to prove I did not, and I found I would not take it." The Dowager Duchess said nothing, and Verena inclined her head, not unkindly. "You lost, madam, not because I am grasping or ambitious. I refused your son's coronet, that first day, and meant it. You lost because I love him, and you could not conceive that a poor woman might value love above money, because you never have, and so you offered the one bribe that could only prove my love rather than break it. I am sorry it grieves you, but I will make him happy, which you never did, and I will tell him the truth, which you never dared, and in time you may even come to be glad of me, though I do not require it. Good day." And she left the old woman speechless, outmaneuvered not by cunning, but by the one thing the dowager had spent her whole calculating life failing to account for, which was a love that could not be bought. And the dowager sat a long while alone, and understood, dimly and too late, that she had been beaten by something she did not possess, and had never valued, and that her son had found, in the poor cousin she had chosen for her supposed biddability, the one thing all the family's money and consequence had never purchased, someone who loved him for himself, and could not be paid to stop. God did not help the dowager, as it turned out, though Verena did, with a mercy the old woman had not earned and never quite forgave. For when the marriage went forward despite her, and the dowager found herself outmaneuvered and displaced, the natural expectation was that the new young duchess would revenge herself on the mother-in-law who had tried to buy her off. Verena did the opposite, and did it deliberately, because she had decided long ago that her own good opinion of herself was her whole estate, and she would not spend it on cruelty even to a woman who deserved it. She treated the dowager, always, with perfect courtesy and unshakable firmness, neither cowed by her nor cruel to her, simply immovable, a young duchess who could not be ruled and would not be baited, who ran her own house and told her own husband the truth, and gave the dowager the respect due her age, and none of the control she craved. And the dowager, who had expected either a biddable victim or a vengeful enemy, found herself instead with a daughter-in-law who was merely, maddeningly, her own person, and who was, moreover, so plainly good for her son, who bloomed under Verena's honesty into a man the dowager barely recognized and, in her cold heart, could not help but prefer, that the old woman's opposition wore itself out against Verena's serene immovability, and curdled, over years, into a grudging and never admitted respect. And the marriage was, by every account, one of the happiest and liveliest in England, happy with the particular happiness of two people who told each other the truth, for Verena never stopped. She told the Duke of Ashcroft the truth every day of their marriage, exactly as she had from the first, corrected him when he was wrong, teased him when he was pompous, praised him when he earned it and not before, and the Duke, who had spent 35 years being lied to by flatterers, and had nearly turned to stone under it, drank her honesty like a man dying of thirst, and became, under it, one of the most just and generous and genuinely beloved men in the country, remade daily by the one person who had ever cared enough to tell him the truth. He said often that Verena had saved his life by refusing to marry him, and it was true, for the woman who had wanted him would have flattered him into stone, and the woman who had not wanted him had loved him into a person, and the difference between the two was the difference between a slow death and a whole life. She wished me good luck, the Duke of Ashcroft would tell the story, years on, with the particular relish of a man recounting the best thing that ever happened to him. I told her I could have done better, meaning to wound her, and she smiled and wished me good luck finding better, and meant it, and walked out, the first person in my life who did not want me, and therefore the first person in my life worth wanting. I spent months earning what my rank could not buy. It was the hardest thing I ever did, and the only thing I ever did that was worth anything. And I will tell you the whole secret of it, since you ask. I could not have done better. There was no better. There never is, when you have found the one person who will tell you the truth and love you anyway. Everyone else is worse, however grand their blood. Marry the one who does not want you for your coronet and will not flatter you, and cares enough to tell you when you are a fool. And count yourself, as I count myself, the most fortunate man alive, saved from a lifetime of comfortable lies by a poor cousin who wished me good luck and meant it.